But in my day-to-day life, I just really misunderstood what divinity was, I think. And for me, as a human being living a human life on earth, divinity for me is the magic in the mundane. It's the change of the seasons. It's being able to feel joy in my family life and some of the challenges that come along with having a family. Being able to love to cook for my family, or being able to love the walks that we take.
Welcome to the Consciousness of the Way. I'm your humble servant and seafood, Taoist Master San Qing. And I'm feeling like I have this fiery spark that could revert me back to my Scottish ways. And here we have this incredible gift. I want to welcome to the podcast Rhonda, Celtic Seer, among many other things, helping people find their way back to who they really are through these incredible wisdom teachings. Welcome to the podcast, my dear friend.
Hi, thanks for the invite. It's really nice to be here.
Yeah, wow. How things turn so dramatically. I'm as high as a kite. I don't know about you, but it's on like Donkey Kong. This incredible unity, this union, this divinity that just presents itself out of a natural selection of default for both of us is the evidence of this power that we all possess within a state of awareness. And so I would love you, my dear friend, to share with the audience a little bit, an abbreviated version of how you got here.
Sure. I like doing this. I do it on every podcast. I do. And I think it's really important for my work and the way that I teach and the medicine that I bring to go back to the origins and go back to the roots, because it really demonstrates why I do what I do. And it's always fun. I like to tell the story. So I grew up in a real dichotomy of space. So my parents were both deeply spiritual people. I was baptized in a spiritualist church. My parents were spiritual mediums and channelers, among other things. There was, we would go and see Indian gurus and all kinds of things. And it was amazing. It was confusing because they would change what they were doing every 5 minutes. There was always a new thing to follow, but I used to see things myself, and I was always encouraged, and it was never something to be afraid of or scared about. And so that really set me up well in faith for what I would do later. So I didn't have that kind of crushing of the childhood spirit in that way. But in other ways, I really did, because even though my parents were that way, they were also incredibly emotionally immature, and we lived in quite deep poverty as well. So money was always a problem. Sometimes we had to live with relatives, and there was, it was really tough. And there was lots of drama-driven behaviours and family ancestral constellations. It was just a really difficult environment to grow up in. They were stressed out. They were emotionally unavailable. They ran like narcissistic constellations throughout our family as well. And I was the scapegoat, and they had the golden child. All that stuff happened. They were unavailable in so many ways. And yet they did their best, right? My dad was an alcoholic. My mum was an enabler. It was a big mess. It was, yeah. Alongside all of this, like, wonder and spiritual stuff that would go on. So this brought me to this understanding from before I probably even can consciously remember, that just because you're spiritual and you do spiritual stuff, it doesn't mean you're enlightened, special, or any different to anyone else who isn't connecting with the dead or channeling or reading spiritual books on a daily basis. So my childhood taught me that words, knowledge, connection are all fine, but they don't necessarily drive human change. They don't necessarily break ancestral curses. That being spiritual can be a very clever way to kid yourself on that you're doing the work, but you're really not. It just doesn't translate into your human day-to-day life. So for me, that's what my childhood taught me. And then, you know, what is really true as well about my parents is that you couldn't meet two people who tried harder. They really tried. They read and they discussed, and I watched them try this and try and try and try. And then about 11 years ago, my dad died, sadly, and he never found peace from his traumas and from his ancestral issues. And I thought, when he died, that was the moment that I thought, you know, there has to be more to life than this. I have struggled with the same things as my parents for all this time. I was in my 30s at the time, and that was the moment that I found shamanism. It kind of fell into my life. And it was amazing because it made real sense and helped me to connect with the things I needed to do to drive change, you know, throughout my life. In my adult life, I had a child very young to an abusive man, and then ended up homeless for a while, and then pulled myself up and went back to college and became an accountant and became successful on the outside. But I was desperately unhappy, desperately depressed. I was kind of mean, actually. As a person, I was very negative. That's where my slant was, very negative. I had zero emotional maturity. You know, they really did a number on me. So I had this like faith and belief in all things spiritual, but at the same time, I was living in hell. It was a hellish life to live. So then when my dad died, that's when everything changed. As often the way, grief is a doorway into something new. And at that point, I just surrendered. I just said to the universe, God, or whatever you want to call it, help me, just help me. And shamanism appeared at that point. So that's in a nutshell, really.
Wow. It's so powerful and so simplistic, yet so overlooked. You know, the Sherlock to your Watson is to find those crumbs through the labyrinth of, you know, the human condition, the psyche. You know, the idea that you are separate from your mind. And this is a perplexing paradox that human condition breeds and basically puts a massive wall up for anyone looking to express themselves as a human being all things. That superpower that you turn on as you start to unravel all this nonsense that seems to be attached to the personality, the finite mind, the corrupted, bankrupt, deficient, repeating behavior that goes over and over and over again. And it's part of the human condition. Furthermore, through inquiry, you realize you're none of those things. Yet it's part of the complementary gift that comes with entering into this space. You have to go back through the labyrinth to return to who you really are and remember you're whole. And remember that power, that innate power is within you, it's within all of us. And then we have that connection, that unity, that divinity is basically revealed, and you return to it. It's a very powerful, in some ways we call it within Taoism, we call it the Taoist rite of passage, through that revelation of self-realization.
Yeah, and for me, during my 20s and early 30s, you know, I spent a lot of time trying to find healing for myself. So I would read books and, you know, do classes, and I would read things like, one book that I remember particularly strongly was a book by Krishnamurti. And I would read this book and it made so much sense. It like really touched me, and I couldn't do anything with it. I didn't know how to get myself from where I was to this place. I was like, I want to be there. But I'm reading this book and I'm like, how do I do that? How do I move from where I am now to there? And I would try some of the things that were, I mean, Krishnamurti's a bit philosophical and deep, but you could kind of glean some ideas about what you could do, and I would try those things, and I would try other people's suggestions and other teachers, and I just couldn't get anywhere. And I didn't start really moving forward with any momentum or obvious change until I found a framework that really worked for me, which is something called the 3 cauldrons. And the 3 cauldrons are like chakras, but Celtic. So we have our own ancient power centers in Celtic mythology called the 3 cauldrons. And what that gave me, what that helped me with, was to get from where I was, which was like just very sick, because you have to start at the beginning. So it's in the lower cauldron, you have to start with bodily senses, looking after your needs, really simple, basic things that people just overlook and don't think about. Dealing with shame, dealing with past, mistakes that one's made that you carry and you ruminate on. So all of those very simple things often get missed, and people end up rushing to the upper cauldron, which is the spiritual dimension of the 3 cauldrons, and they miss out all of this lower work. And it gets to the point where they might have connection to spirit, but it's patchy, or perhaps their ethics aren't really on point. So, that's, in my opinion, kind of questionable. I like to have good ethics when I'm connecting with spirit. And it just gets really messy because we don't have any elders to teach us these things. So in the 3 cauldrons method or framework, you start in the lower, sort yourself out on just a very basic, fundamental human level. And then you move to the middle cauldron, and that's more kind of how you present what is external to you. So do you have good boundaries? Do you know how to stand up for yourself? Are you a people pleaser? Do you need to change, like what behaviors are you exhibiting that needs to change? And then how do you connect with your emotional landscape? Can you accept and be in great joy, and accept and be in deep grief? All of the massive spectrum of human emotion, can you connect with it safely? And if you've dealt with your lower cauldron, your nervous system, everything lower and unconscious in your body is in alignment, then you're much more likely to be able to feel safe enough to put up a boundary, to deal and accept joy into your life. And then you have those 2 things aligned, and then suddenly the upper cauldron just opens, and you're connected to what we would call Imbaz Forosni, which is Gaelic for divine knowledge of the gods. In Native American culture, it might be called the hollow bone. So you become this conduit for divinity, which is great. But people try and just jump straight to that, and they don't understand why it doesn't work. And it's because you've got all this lower human, wondrous human stuff to do first. And it's a cycle. So I go back down to my lower cauldron many times, and will continue to do so probably until the day I die. But for me, the simplicity of that system really worked for me. I'm neurodivergent. I struggle to concentrate. I can't get into the esoteric, wordy, philosophical area, because it takes me up and out of my body and out of my life and out of my connection to the earth. Whereas a simple framework like this allows me to love, connect, and be a part of my human existence and my human life, and still be connected to my divinity in a way that's manageable for me, which I think is one of the things that this framework can help with. And you said something there about the innate power. And I think our innate power comes from sovereignty. And to be a sovereign human being means to work with all of these aspects.
You had me at hello.
Such a good movie.
Yeah. That power, what you're speaking of, it refers back to everything. All Indigenous practices seem to have some relevance to each other, and it's not dismissing the actual purpose and cultivation or practice of the individual path, because that is so important. This is what we call, to some degree, a level of knowing, gnosis, that is a fundamental sort of way to walk with, the end goal being completely, unified, that you are the word, will, light, love of the Tao, perhaps God, as you put it, whatever your reference point is to your higher divinity that will present itself in this material state. And so, you know, method in the madness is absolutely a huge complement to anyone's path of self-realization. And that's why Taoist alchemy is so powerful for any seeker, because once you start to acquire, imperium, dominion, maestro over the 50 trillion selves and the energetic potential that is this currency, energy is the currency of this material state. And with that, you're able to maestro the distortion, as my dear friend, the Buddhist monk, would call the dukkha, within this state. With your attention intention, you create. This is your default. That's who you are as a human being. And furthermore, without being corrupted with the limitations and the deficiencies that come with the human condition, you must walk through that passage to self-realization that is not weighed down with the basically, infantile processes that people get very caught up in. So within Taoism, we have the physical body, the energy body, the spirit body, the sun body, the earth body, the moon body, and finally the oneness body, the ultimate, and being. Ascending or accessing highest source information is the path of a Taoist knower, from a seeker to a knower. If you're thinking you're not knowing, if you're knowing, you are feeling, and that simplicity will be as self-evident through the tuning fork, the barometer, the physical flesh that is the anchor to this realm. And so many people, as you put it, want to get out there when they have to go in here, but they don't understand that just yet. That's why they want to get out. They want to, let me throw all this crap out quickly, the baby with the bathwater. And, you can get, quite frankly, a rat in a wheel for the rest of your natural born life if you are not aware that the energy potential is everything. That energy potential is created second by second. You are a creator. And so what you do with that is determinative by your abilities to transmute that and return to whole, which is basically what healing is. So through that process, you are able to cultivate an awareness that will show you evidence. So, within Taoism, it's simple. Inquiry, contemplation, curiosity. Curiosity breeds hopium. Hopium is such an incredible place to be in. And if nurtured, it blossoms a belief system. That belief system is only met with the experiential moment of now. And that can only be validated for an absolute truth for you, not from me, not for John Smith down the street. The absolute truth lies within yourself. And that when someone gives you the absolute, you run from them and go in the other direction, because they're already indoctrinated into some groupthink or limited perception that may not be your path. You have to sample the goods before you realize whether it's for you or not for you. That's the purpose of the gravitation to whatever it is that sparks desire and inquiry.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting part of the way that our community, we'll have an online community, the way we work. We talk about this a lot, and it is this: there are a million paths to heaven. You have to find the one that works for you. And I do think that we live in an age of privilege, and the privilege is that we are safe to explore any spirituality that we desire for the first time in Britain, anyway, in a long time. We're not in any danger necessarily. In Britain, we're allowed to just choose, and you're in the US, and you guys are similar depending on the communities that you live in. And I think that that's something that should be embraced. I have Christian shamanic people. I have Wiccan. We have pagans, people who identify more as druids. We have shamanic astrologers. And we have people that work with shamanism and Taoism as well. And to me, the mechanism that you use, the pathway that you choose, doesn't matter. To me, it's what you do with it that counts. So rather than becoming a vessel of spiritual bypassing, I'm so wonderful, I meditate 3 hours a day, I do this and I do that, and then you go into your life and you're exactly the same. You make no effort to change. You don't apologize when you should. You're a bit of a dick or whatever. Then to me, it doesn't matter if you're a Taoist, a pagan, or a Christian. What you are doing is using spirituality as a way to avoid the pain of your inner landscape. So the way that we work with that is to say, bring what you like, bring any pathway you choose. But when you come here, you go through the 3 cauldrons with that in mind. And the idea is to get to the painful part so that it's almost like choosing to be a cycle breaker in life. So the cycle breakers come to this earth with the ability to feel the pain of their ancestral line, so they can feel it, transmute it, and become, as you've said, become whole. That idea of being able to feel the depth of the ancestral pain that's passed down and break that is just such a magic thing. And we do that all the time in our community through this work. And sometimes when people arrive, they'll say, oh, but I do this and I do that. And I'll say, okay, are you happy? Are you happy in your life? Are you happy with your relationships? Are you happy with your work? Are you happy with the relationships you have? Do you feel fulfilled? Well, no. Okay, well, let's look at that. Let's dive in a little bit to some of these areas and see if there's like little changes we can start to make. And that's when the transformations really happen, when people are brave enough to connect with the things that are painful that they need to work with, essentially. So yeah, we don't mind a bit of spiritual bypass, and if people are like really in pain and just need a break, but as long as they're looking at something, as long as there's a shift and a change, and then over time that kind of picks up momentum and can really make a huge shift over a long time. That's the other thing as well about this work. It's not a short thing, is it? It's not a one and done type affair. It's something that has to be worked with and accepted over a long period. And rest is really important. Integration, accepting the challenge of the North, as we say in Celtic mythology, accepting the battle and the challenge of the North, but then allowing the East and the sun to rise again and putting down that battle and allowing yourself to rest and be in a place of integration round the wheel of the year, if you work with something like that. Anyway, perhaps I got off topic there.
No, not at all. I mean, it seems so similar and yet so uniquely different. Taoism is sort of thrown into a very similar path as Buddhism. Mm-hmm. And we put these sort of things together, and they're fundamentally very different. And so I love the way you said, hey, there's a million ways. I thought you were quoting me. There's a million ways up the mountain. I say this 1,000 times a day. It's like fundamentally, if you dismiss someone else's belief system, you dismiss your own. Yes. That is the very issue of realizing you are me, I am you. Yes. And so this is all happening at once. So a Taoist lens is quite simple. Reality is a billows. You are contracting and expanding at the same time. You're all things and nothing at the same time. Your mission, if you choose to accept it, Ethan Hunt, is to find the center point, which we refer to as the Wu Ji. And when you return to the primordial mother, which is the void, the source of all things for a Taoist, you will find that creation, that spark, that unification, that divinity, and that will show itself as perfection. And so between the breath in and the breath out is the center point. And as you hold and pause, you accumulate what we call absorb the riches, and you saturate and identify that center point, returning divinity to a space that is distorted, that is in excess of deficiency. That's why it has such a potent effect within this material state, which is subject to a dualistic polarizing effect of yin and yang. And when I say primordial mother, I'm talking about whole. Yin and yang is the byproduct of the primordial mother. Yin is the absorption of all colors. Yang is the emission of all colors. And when you understand the magic between these polarizing elements of this state, you can return to perfection. And when divinity is shown, miracles take place. Supernatural things are evident in this present moment because that's all we have. And this is what we refer to as Wu Wei, which is effortless action, effortless effort. And, you know, most people are like, well, Jifu, you know, all manifesting teachers tell you you have to act on, you can't just sit back and make. Breath is action, my dear friend. And when you use that appropriately, you harness this incredible potential from definitely an alchemical process. Fundamentally, for any alchemy and magic that I teach people, the framework in this realm is the karmic model. Karma is the way that you enter into altering things at will, because the subject of that is the human condition. When I bring in the energy of perfection, it is altered using people's karmic belief systems. That's the very deficiency. When you're emotional, you're suggestible. All I'm doing is filling the jigsaw puzzle as I lay down a grid, open up power centers, vortices, portals. These are all part of, you know, star stepping magic for Taoists. They've gone hundreds of thousands of years. We can go on and regress. This is sort of the fundamental understanding. And I think it's a delusional state for many, because within Buddhism, Buddhism's really simple. It's a pile of shit covered in diamonds. And a Buddhist looks for more pain and suffering, and they remove a diamond and find more shit. As my dear friend, the Buddhist monk, would say, dukkha is all I'm interested in, bro. I don't care about anything. I want distortion. I want to find it. I want to eradicate it. And this avatar, I'm going to toss to the side and move on to the next one. When the hubcaps come off, that's it. Whereas a Taoist is about embodying and bringing immortality, crystallizing it into this material state. And so the duration of the longevity is a huge component. Diamonds covered in shit. I just take it and find another diamond. That's how I look at it.
Yeah. That's interesting. For me, like a lot of what you were saying there makes me think about, you know, you talk about perfection and divinity and finding what that looks like. And a lot of the way I think about that is the magic and the mundane. So I used to look for my divinity in quite magical places. You know, I would want to, I mean, I do see things and I channel things, and I do seership, which is bringing forward, it's kind of similar to channeling. It's really magic. It's great. But in my day-to-day life, I just really misunderstood what divinity was, I think. And for me, as a human being living a human life on earth, divinity for me is the magic and the mundane. It's the change of the seasons. It's being able to feel joy in my family life and some of the challenges that come along with having a family, being able to love to cook for my family, or being able to love the walks that we take. I'm I have ADHD, and I'm quite a impatient person, and I need things to be moving along. So with my kids, just watching them enjoying every moment, splashing in a puddle, looking at the leaves and the bugs, and just slowing everything down, which is a lot of the work that personally I have done and do. Mm-hmm. But it was that magic in the mundane. And for me, a lot of the work that I do is about bringing people out of this idea that divinity is something up there, mm-hmm. that it's all external to our daily lives, And I encourage people to think about their daily life as magical and spiritual. And, right, here's the thing. Who says, right, that so as a woman who has children, I talk for myself, but whoever's listening, you can map this to your own experience. But who says, for me, for example, so I have a kid, I have chosen to breastfeed. So I get up, we co-sleep. I get up at night, we're awake quite often still. She's still 3, but I don't sleep at night much still, or without interruption anyway. And it's divine for me. I'm like, I get to do this with my baby. Who says that's challenging? That is a challenge. So who says that's any less spiritual than meditating for 15 hours or doing a silent Vipassana retreat for 10 days? Like, I don't understand how we've got to this place today where some things are seen as spiritual and they're often external to our daily lives. So I would encourage anybody to say, well, what are the hard things I do in my life? The hard things are I go to a job that I don't enjoy because it gives me financial stability for myself if you're single, or for your family. You get to do that. Isn't that wonderful? And that's like a spiritual practice, is being grateful for the things that you have on a daily basis. Even, I've met people who have, frankly, less than nothing, but they're so joyful and loving and excited about their day. And that to me is divinity in human form, I think.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, right from the TAO Te Ching, which I transcribed with my teacher Lao Tzu last year, the 2024 version, which we refer to as the magical register. Every verse is an incantation leading into 81 levels of consciousness, a frequency, a color, and a shape. And you are mirrored with divinity, perfection. Now, what that means is you can be a jewel in the royal court or a beggar on the cobble road. Perfection lies within all of us. But to get there, there is a method to the madness, to understand that, the simplicity of the human condition can be very much, as you put it, it's a very interesting word. Mundane is something that a lot of my Buddhist friends use. It defines what they're observing with their dukkha. And that's completely beautiful. When you detach and attach, is that realizing that you're not just one facet or a potential grain of sand. You're all things, right back to the bellows. You're everything and nothing at the same time. Your choice, if you choose to accept it, is to determine that. And that lies in realizing when you're at your lowest, you're at your highest. But through that lens, you can forever be in a punishing mode of humanness, which is beautiful when you discover the Icky center, which is the sentience that brings you to what we call the superpower of being a human being, which is empathy. But that lies within the unraveling of what you consider is your mundane reality, and that being trapped in a trigger or an emotion or a thought or a feeling is very much the misdirection of psychology that was injected into the human timeline back in the 1600s, 1500s. And furthermore, it will continually take you further and further away from your true nature of who you are when you believe that there is a mind, body, and spirit. All is one, one is all. There is no separation. But to do that, I always tell people, don't erase your personality. It's not a good idea. My personality.
Good luck with that.
I like chocolate bonbons. I like driving my side-by-side in the desert at 100 miles an hour. And unfortunately, I do watch Netflix sometimes. I'm going to cancel the subscription next month. The reality is that has nothing to do with the now moment, which I believe you're referring to, because the now moment is me bearing witness to the birth of one of my 6 children that I delivered all 6 of them, and the union that my wife and I have as that divine spark has created life, and that life is perfection. And so that present moment is all I have. It's not the past, it's not the future. I've never witnessed manifestation, magic, healing, or participated in as such in anything more than the now moment, which doesn't require my participation. What that means is I'm no place, no person, no thing. That is unification. That is whole. And that's when you acquire what you would call superhuman, supernatural, paranormal. That is nothing more than supernormal. Yet for you to get there, to detach and attach, as we put it, because there is a point where nothing moves my needle. You know, if I have someone bring my child to me and they've broken their arm, I'm not going to move into the very deficient state of fatherhood to acquire a state of healing. That's not how it works, because love is a subsection of all things. This is the distorted reality that people put themselves in. If it's love, then you will find the answer, the fabric to reality is this unified love. Love is a part of the whole. And when people just get caught up in their love, they stay in the love, and it's very much subjective to a hallmark reality. You may see love as razor blades and bunny rabbits, and for me, it's unicorns and rainbows. It is only when you ascend, and this is where Taoism is the same, but perhaps different. We look at things as energy potential within the yin and yang. That's it. And so when you ascend, you identify the energy potential. It's vibratory, frequential, and it has a resonance. Once you acquire that resonance and you are ascending, you're not virtue signaling, as you put it earlier, what you find is you cannot fight it. The true serum, the true remedy of ascension without any effort, without any action, is selflessness and servitude. And you will know it immediately. It will not be something you have to emote towards. You'll have to find it. And the only evidence of that, if you're on the path of it, and that charge you and I got for union, it's right now. We experience it. We feel it. We know it's true. And so that gives us the ability to realize, perhaps maybe my gratitude as a parent is to see and be around, and my manifestation is I'm around my wife and kids 24 hours a day. If I'm not doing a podcast or emerged and teaching somebody, they are at my side. And that is an experiment that very few people have the opportunity to experience, because I cannot, honestly, my sacrifice is that. The sacrifice to it is selfishness to selflessness is the sacrifice, that realization.
Selfishness is just fabulous. I love being selfish. I think that for me, when I learned how to be selfish, it really changed quite a lot. And I recognize some parallels there with what you've said about your family. I do a bit of traveling to teach, but I don't travel without my family. My husband and I have 2 kids. One is grown. She's 23, and one is 3 years old. So the 23-year-old does her own thing. But my husband, his work is with Mirren and the family. He stays at home, and I work. I'm at home now, for example. I work from home, and I'm available for my family in lots of different ways that I wouldn't have if I still did what I used to. I used to be an accountant working in corporate finance, and I wouldn't have that. So I recognize I did the same thing, and my husband and I decided not to have a child if we couldn't do it that way. So we set our life up so that we could do it that way. So for me, I really get that. But anyway, what I was going to say as well about what you were saying there is a couple of things. One of them about what you were saying really brings up this idea of authenticity on the path to that state of divinity that you mentioned. And I think people get confused about authenticity. I certainly used to. And it's striving to be something other than you are. I need to become authentic. I need to become my authentic self. And that completely misses the point, which makes me think about what you were saying.
I will say, just as a side note, reach out to my mother. Yeah, you're authentic and unapologetic. 2 words that I have personality issues with. But otherwise, please go ahead.
Yeah. But if you're on a path of self-actualization and you're trying to figure out how to get to the point where you are at peace with yourself, you're at peace with your choices, you're at peace with your past. But peace doesn't mean in denial about the difficulties of life. It doesn't mean suddenly everything will be easy, but you can be at peace with the way things are and have been. And I think that being authentic with who you are right now is so good. Like, and we talked earlier about this idea of spiritual bypassing and becoming some kind of spiritual dude, you know, spiritual person. I'm so spiritual. But what people will often do is that they move away from the authentic parts of themselves that are maybe not as easy to deal with. So for me, one of the things that my students talk about a lot is the fact that I'm not scared to say I don't know. I don't mind saying I was wrong about this and I'd like to change my opinion about whatever we've been talking about. I've worked so hard on the shame that drove those behaviours that it allows me to be in the space of vulnerability in that way. So with going back to this idea of the 3 cauldrons, it's like I think the end goal sounds kind of similar, and it's becoming that kind of sovereign being who can live in life from a place of love, empathy, understanding, clear communication. But empathy without boundaries is self-destruction. So you have to be a sovereign human being. You have to be able to say no. You have to allow people their disappointments. You can't be all things to all people. Some people won't like you for reasons only known to themselves, probably. There's just so much that goes on with other people that may affect how you move through this life. And if you can become sovereign, in Celtic terminology, sovereign means to be whole, to be confident within yourself, to know who you are, to be able to say yes when you mean yes and no when you mean no, to be able to handle everything life throws at you, or if you can't handle it, know how to get back to yourself. So you have tools that you can use. And I think I really enjoy some of the things that you've been describing, and a lot of what you describe I have read in different places and I really enjoy it, but I would struggle as somebody starting out to get to the point that you're describing, because it's so far out, it's so far away from who many people are when they start on a path. So to start out, it's like some super simple things is like listen to your own needs, figure out where you can start to put up some boundaries. Like there's just lots of little things. Go to the bathroom when you need to go to the bathroom. Drink water. Look after your sacred vessel. Is that really difficult for you? Because some people find that really hard because they have very low self-worth and don't know how to actually get to the point where they can even look after themselves. And I've been there, so depressed, chronically depressed and somewhat suicidal, and I didn't do any of those things, even though I knew that I should. And it took, for me, the difference with shamanism was beginning to work with what we call shamanic guides. So beings who, in my opinion, guides are the universe's way of interacting with you in a way that you can understand wherever you're at. Yeah. So for me, being able to go on a shamanic journey or an altered state of consciousness, some people use plant medicine. I don't at the moment. Like I have used plant medicine in the past, but now I use drums, music, silence, whatever feels right for me. I go on a shamanic journey with intention, and we can talk about intention because I feel like that's a really important part of any human life. Intention drives all things. So you do what's called the shamanic journey, and you connect with your spiritual guides and you can talk to them. So it's essentially like talking to the universe. You can gain insights and information. You can ask for healing, support, wisdom and guidance from this team of guides who are yours, and who you can trust and who you can connect with, so you don't feel so alone, you don't feel so wretched. And over time, you build a relationship with these beings. Sorry, son, I'm all coughing. Wait a minute. So over time, you build a friendship and a trust, so that later on, when you can get out of bed and you've managed to make these changes, and you know, you feel better about life and about yourself, and you begin to maybe connect with some spiritual things, and maybe you begin to get messages, and you know, maybe your spiritual gifts become more apparent, then you have guides who will help you, who you trust. So if, for example, you want to be I see you have lots of trans mediums, for example, on your show. If you want to work with that, then you have guys you can trust, who can tell you that who you're connecting with are who they say they are. Or I work with seership, which is a kind of different way of kind of channeling information. It's quite a Scottish thing, and I channel that through this team of guides who are my friends and my family, who have been around me since before I can remember. So for anyone who's like, I don't know how to do this, give Shamanic Journey a try. Build a relationship with some shamanic guides. See if that's something that might help, because it might. You know, I do think that when left to our own devices and our own mind and in our own head, we can get to the point where we think ourselves into something that's not real. So I think community is really important for groundedness, for accountability, for discussion, trusted community. And I think that shamanic guides, or whatever, I don't know if you've got the equivalent, shamanic guides to support you with connecting with divinity and the infinite nature of the universe is so helpful, because it kind of takes some of that burden away, that you're like, oh God, how am I going to do this? Am I doing it right? You know, who am I talking to? Is this safe? You know, your guides are there to support you with all of that. So yeah, I think that kind of goes hand in hand with some of what you were saying.
No, I agree with you. I mean, brings it back to, you know, you're talking about you can be spiritual and be a complete asshole, which is
Yeah.
really, you know, and that's why the method to the madness is so essential. I think you bring up a great point. Okay, this sounds really amazing and it's whimsical and pie in the sky shit, but how do you get there? That's why I always return to the method. So the first thing that we teach any Taoist seeker is you go down to the basement and you start at the bottom with the emotions don't control you, you control your emotions. And quite quickly, I can show you how empowered you become. And it's a permanence of a superpower where you can take your emotional and mental content like an icon on your computer screen and toss it to the side. This is a simplistic mastery that needs to be acquired by all people that start on a human condition basis. To ascend, you must first understand these are transmuted byproducts of the human condition. And it's not to dismiss that, because you have a physical body, which is an anchor for your having a human experience as an immortal. These are all present moment things. So you need to master that. And, you know, I have an app that does exactly that for people. So within 9 weeks, you're equivalent to two sessions with a shrink, a therapist, someone who wants to rinse out every time your mummy didn't give you cookies when you were 5. You will start to realize that that information is energy. And what you do with it, when you remove the feeling and the emotion, the thought is wisdom. And you can reflect on that without what someone would call the trigger, the trauma, however you want to perceive it. But you must be able to obtain the access to the feeling and the emotion that has the charge and the potential. The thought is wisdom that you can reflect on through your natural born life without the albatross of this weight of a reoccurring event that dictates, manipulates your perception of reality. So when you master that,
Yeah.
You do something like what I've developed, the way 126. The people are janitors, they're judges, they're accountants, they're people that work in light energy, Reiki masters, Qigong masters, Chinese medicine doctors, whatever. When you hit play, you've instantly affected with the feeling of 8 pina coladas, a full body massage, and 10 days in the Bahamas. And people go, what the f- is that? Well, it's a visual audible experience creating a kinesthetic charge where you are starting to master yourself instantaneously within the first exposure. So then I give them what they call an Easter egg, where they can reflect on what they've mastered instead of sitting there. This whole meditating, I love the way you go, meditate for 3 hours, I'm spiritual on this. That is nonsensical to me. You have to have evidence. You need to be self-realized. You need to, whatever time and attention you put in, as a Taoist, nothing goes to waste. It doesn't matter what it is. If you're sitting there nurturing your child overnight, breastfeeding, doing whatever, as a parent, my commitment to my children is the above anything else, my wife and my children. But that in turn is my gift, is my offering. And furthermore, if I resort back to a very powerful incantation from one of my teachers, Jade Emperor, it goes as simple as this: a power abundant in its giving you will receive, unifying the body with the spirit with the energy, bringing heaven to earth, transcending all is one, one is all, revealing perfection manifest. That is your gift. That is your offering. That is your gift. That is your offering. That is your gift. That is your offering. So in turn, the reflection of you in servitude, it returns back. You're in service to others, which in turn is you're in service to yourself. And when that realization of selfishness turns into selflessness, there is an epiphany where people go, holy shit, this is the secret source. This is the true essence of who I am. And you cannot fight it. And so I resort back to the method, because the method is quite simple. Energy potential within this spectrum is nothing more than the polarizing effects, duality. This is just what people consider this realm, this dimension, however you want to put it. As a Taoist, it's frequential. And that frequency starts with the vibration. The vibration comes from the energy potential. And if met with a resonance, you cultivate that, and all of a sudden the now moment is embodied. So when you detach as the human condition and reattach as the primordial mother, which is you are the now moment, that means you can have any feeling, emotion, anything you want. It will not distract from the resonance. So you can experience your human condition, yet it don't mean shit, because you still are able to acquire the resonance that will create a return to unification for anyone around you, which is really my path as an ambassador to planet Earth, is to help people remember who they are, because the collective raises that consciousness, which will return everyone to that secret connection, identifying the sentience, and then in turn the superpower is empathy. And when everyone returns to that charge, that unity we're feeling right now, that love, whatever you want to call it, is this very moment. That's it. That's all we have.
That's really interesting when you said about the basement right at the start of that explanation, because we have the lower cauldron, and you'd said, basically, I think what you were saying in a nutshell is you remove the negative resonance of memories. So people carry so much, and 3 cauldrons, it would be the lower cauldron, not the basement, but it sounds very similar. So in the lower cauldron, we would do something called recapitulation, which is actually originally a Toltec technique, but I've adapted it to make it simpler because it's too complicated for my ADHD brain. So it's super simple. You start with easy memories that still are a bit difficult. So you don't want to be going straight to really difficult memories, because that's takes a bit of practice. So in the lower cauldron, one of the things that you can do to start to shift some of that stuff that we carry is to bring the memory to mind, allow it to start to play out, and however that experience is for you. And as it plays out, you breathe out anything that you've picked up that's not yours. and then you breathe in anything you lost in that moment. You just do that for, it doesn't take long, actually, a few minutes, or until the memory just kind of fades away or you get distracted. And you can do that with the same memory a couple of times. And most people who use that really simple technique come back to me and say, I can't believe that memory doesn't bother me anymore. I used it for myself, and there were so many memories that I thought, this is going to haunt me for the rest of my life. I'm going to carry this to my grave. And now I don't even remember what they were. I'm like, I don't even know what they were. But they seemed so big and so powerful at the time. So that's what we would do. We would do that in the lower cauldron, and it would be called recapitulation. So that sounds similar. And then the other thing you'd mentioned there was about, holding space for others. And that's one of the fallacies, I think, of the spiritual world, is that you need to find a healer, to find someone else to do the healing for you. But that's not really the way that I see that working. I hold space for you to find your own divinity. I hold space for you to find your path to healing. And when someone's willing to do that, I think it's very powerful. I don't get in other people's way. I just create doorways and safe space for people to walk through in community, actually. And I think community is really important, don't you think, in a spiritual path like this? Because when we try and do it alone, we get tangled and the threads tangle. And even if you manage to have some really great epiphanies without the tribe around, it can become difficult to maintain, difficult to follow. So yeah, in our community space, we do the Cauldrons Way course together, and we have our community space where we can share and bear witness to each other's journeys. And we have this cool thing in our, it's not always very popular with new folk, but when they get into the swing of it, they love it, right? So it's called eye language. So in our community, I decided that I wouldn't have, do you know these online spaces where you say something and then you get like this fire hose of like advice, unsolicited advice. You should do this, or you're wrong and it's this way. And spiritual communities online can be really difficult to deal with. And I thought,
I love it.
I don't.
First like of an interview I had, I got butchered by about 100 people. Unfortunately, that was very difficult for them, but very powerful for me. I enjoy the deficiency showing itself because they're just expending their own life force, unfortunately.
Yeah, but for people who are not sovereign, that's terrifying. It can really steal power from people, and it can really swipe someone's taking baby steps into a spiritual life and they're told you're wrong, your experience isn't valid, you should do it this way, no, you should do it that way. And it happens. I've never found a space where that doesn't happen. I'm sure they do exist. I'm 100% sure they do exist. I just haven't found one. So I thought, I'm going to make one. So that's what I did. Now in our community, we're so supportive, but we support with our own experience. So for example, if someone says, I had a shamanic journey and I saw an owl, what does that mean? Firstly, I would say, go back to the owl and ask the owl, is the first thing I would say. But then other people, rather than say the owl means this, they will say, I had an experience of an owl on my journey. This is what happened, and this was what I took from it. That's it. So people can choose their pearls of wisdom from other people's direct experience. So we don't make statements of fact. So we're not like, I don't know, I can't even think of any off the top of my head. Witches are X. Or I think witchcraft is, witchcraft is the earth-based this, and this. And I would say, well, to you, that's what it is to you. But in our community, we share our own experience. So in eye language, that would be, my experience of witchcraft is X, Y, and Z. And we keep to that pretty strongly. We have moderators who help, and everybody loves it. Once they get used to it, I remember my teacher, that's where I learned it from my teacher, and she used to make us talk in eye language, and I would be infuriated because I would know what other people needed, San. I would know. I just wanted to share my knowledge of what other people should be doing. So it was rather infuriating, eye language, and I did hate it to start with. but it really changed the way that I interacted with my entire world, at home, at work, everywhere. And people in the community feel that way too. They take eye language out into their day-to-day lives. If their boss is at work, they implement it at work. It like really changes people's perception of how much unsolicited advice they were chucking out to anybody who would listen. And then what they realize is, going back to one of your points is that they retain their life force, they retain their sovereignty, they retain their power. They're just there experiencing conversations or experiencing connection, rather than spending their time thinking, how am I going to interject myself into your circle, into your existence? So those were the things I was thinking about when you were sharing there. Yeah.
No, that's interesting. I don't remember saying hold space. I don't hold space. That's kind of an interesting term, but you interpreted it that way.
I did, yes.
Yeah. And, I mean, this comes back to your truth is the only truth you need to be concerned with. So I always remember, and I remind people, anyone that gives you an absolute truth, about face and run in the other direction, because that is their perception of reality. But fundamentally, when you bring it back to the brass tacks, as my grandmother would say, the reality is everything is frequency and ultimately resonance. So when you have a situation where you have a perception of reality that is determinative by either your psyche or your experience, because most people stay in that psychological state of limited by what's between their ears, not what they're experiencing to know the truth to the nature of reality through the experiential moment of now. And so I agree with you wholly that, people have absolute truths, and they're normally the ones that are full of shit and cannot produce. I'm a Pepsi challenge guy. So show me. I'll take the Pepsi challenge with anyone. The taste test is now. When I am now, I witness physical, mental, emotional, spiritual healing. I got bit by the spiritual dragon that turned me into the path of lineage holder, and 2 lineages of Taoism ordained into lineage of Taoism, 166, the other one 126, only through my hit the ground running. I had it all happen now within 1 week. So moving from a childhood of, nurturing bodybuilding through an adverse landscape of being raised by a single parent, and my being exposed to the limitation and deficiency of all the kids that I went to school with, and they couldn't work out why they couldn't break my will due to my articulate sort of perception and ability to manipulate the words. And their answer was, Mommy and Daddy beat me last night after a bottle of vodka. I'm going to come in and beat the shit out of you because you're weird. And, after many sessions of, a dozen kids piling on, stomping on me, whatever, I honestly attribute this feeling into what you would call the lower cauldron at a young age of remembering who I was. I have these conversations with JC quite often, more commonly known as Jesus Christ. When I speak to him about his path of sacrifice and pain and suffering within the human condition, it comes back to feeling into that state, because that's the entry level from an energy center perspective. Within Dantians, we have the first 9 that attach from the earth to the universe, and they are called the energy elixir, the field, the energy field. And you obtain your Dantian has the Nidan effects, which is the internal alchemy, and you produce what we call Nigong, which is, internal power. And that all is energy, as is everything else. Whether you want to split hairs and be a physicist, like some of my dear friends that are parapsychologists, physicists, nuts that want to measure everything in science, it comes down to the simplicity of light to wave to matter to particle, realized with your attention intention, cutting from the cloth of perfection we call primordial mother, revealing this currency, the distortion the energy potential that is vibratory, frequential, and resonant. And that resonance is all you need. Now, you can stay trapped in the human condition or not. That's a choice that you bear that cross, you bear that expression of self-realization. If you are able to contribute, and that's the funny part, I don't know where I said I hold space, because I just exhibit a resonance that will give you two things. You either love me or hate me. And that's just, I bring that everywhere. And so that's just evidence of you got a bunch of shit you don't want to address or go to. So I am your problem. Or you realize that that resonance is reminding you who you are, and you merge into that unity. And you, furthermore, you would call it a community where people are surrounding each other and helping them find their own self-realization through a support system. And you come in on your own, you leave on your own. So then there's this level of, I hate to break it to many people, there's a wet nurse scenario that comes with having to be kept with that emotional content. It's like this, we need to raise up the weak to reveal the strength. That's a perception of human condition. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to stay in that. It's your choice if you choose to, but that's part of the journey of the human being. And I love that. And that's where I always go back to the first thing you exercise is your emotional content, because that's a distraction. You can be empowered at the same time as being disempowered. And that comes back to the bellows, which is contracting and expanding. That's it. That's all it is. And so you can either be in complete, as you put it, sovereign state of awareness as whole, or you can be disempowered and be a weak, timid, miserable human being that cannot find their own center point. And I mean, this is all perception. It's all this oscillating effect. And the community that I love what you're saying will bring people's awareness. Within most terms, we just refer to this, if I wanted to water it down, it's called an idiomotor response. So you create within your conscious and unconscious a language that is more coined. And the reason I use this is so many of my friends are in that state of measuring precognition, telepathy, all the good clair senses that I've been teaching people for over 30 years. They want to make sure it's real. It's like, okay, whatever, bro, I'll show you it. When you see the magic materialize, you're like, holy shit, this is real. I've measured this and it actually takes place. Yes. But this idiomotor response is the divine spark that resides within all of us. So when you move your personality out of the way, you can have language with that. And it can come in the form of a tuning fork, dowsing tools, pendulums, a Ouija board, tarot cards. You can find a way to get answers instantaneously that you potentially may have been shut out from your mind because you're still feeling into stuff, and it's all just emotions and feelings. And there's a starting point. There's no right or wrong starting point, ladies and gentlemen and ladies. You have to get into something, feel into it to get what you need to where you are on your own journey. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's really cool. You said a few things there that made me think of a few things. So let me see if I can remember them all. But the first one you were talking.
This is kind of like a test for you.
Yeah, right. Let's see how I do. You mentioned like tarot cards, and you can connect through tarot cards, and you can connect through other means. And I just wanted to say that shamanic guides would be another form of that exact thing that you just said. It doesn't matter what you use. It's like the thing that connects you to the divine. So that was interesting. And then the other thing I was going to mention was the whole like science versus faith. Mm-hmm. And I find that fascinating because to me, I've had my own journey with science. My husband was a geneticist doing a PhD, very scientific, materialistic, a materialist, which isn't. But you know, we've had this kind of journey, and what we've realised, or what we think we've realised over time, or what certainly is true for us, is that science is actually its own dogma. It's its own. It's like a cult or a religion, yeah. And you cannot step outside, and that's why my husband stepped away, because he was like, I can't become like these people. I don't live in this like very tightly constrained environment where there. He said, I haven't met one. And he worked at like quite a prestigious university in Britain, and you know, he said, I have never met one well-rounded, happy scientist in this place. I don't want to live like this. And he left and decided, and we, it was a long time ago, the point where we were changing our lives. And that's really interesting to me. So now I laugh when the scientists are like, we need proof. I'm like, oh, okay. Cool. I'll just leave you with that. Not really my problem, to be honest. And then
I get a lot of fun out of it. I mean, most of them are very blinded by one day.
Sorry, have you listened to the telepathy tapes?
Well, actually, a friend of mine, Jeff Tarrant, is measuring a lot of the autistic kids that are coming up, massive hits of.
Oh my God, I love it.
I mean, that's just evidence of their attunement to the resonance. That's it.
Right. It's so cool. I love it so much.
It's like teaching people, thought projection.
Yeah, and I love the.
When people realize how easily they're manipulated, and I'll do something like draw a color on my hand, close my hand, and go, "What color am I thinking of?" And they go, "Orange," and they go, "How did you know?" That's how quickly I can enter your unconscious. It's just a matter of attuning to it.
Exactly. And don't you think, I'd be interested to get your take on this, because I've always been able to do that, right? Like read minds in a way. It's more intuitive. In the past, it was much more intuitive. These days, it's more conscious. Do it through seership. But these days, I don't spend my time getting information about people, whatever you want to say about it, without their permission. And that's one thing that I find really interesting, is when lots of people in the spiritual field seem to think it's okay to wander around giving messages to people without permission, or just kind of stepping, even people they don't know. I've had people come up to me in the shop and tell me they have messages for me, and I feel
that's kind of like an admission of yours, though.
Yeah, personally, there needs to be like a connection, a reciprocity, and a permission to that like divine connection. And I work with something called the Guardian Guide. So I have this guide that like basically protects.
Well, you've got Fort Knox around you, which gives you your parameters, or your boundaries are set real deep. Someone walks over them, they're going to see the Scottish side of who you really are. I get it. And I think when you admit that, people will come up with the know-it-all realization of, hey, I want to tell you something. You're like, actually, hang on a second. That's a pet peeve of mine, to invade my personal spiritual space.
Yeah, and by the way, they're always wrong. They're always wrong. I've never had anybody do that. I've had, definitely with permission, people can definitely do that with me, and that's fine. But if they come up to me and it's not with consent and permission, they're always wrong. Not one be right.
Yeah,
which is really interesting.
It just comes back to the admission. All I did was look at your aura. Your second energy center, which is what I consider the second energy center, which someone would call their Hindu root chakra, is extremely excess. When it's excess, this person has a boundary like you wouldn't believe. And that's where I start and end. I don't go any further, because it's just, it's a non-mood point of conversation, and someone's going to get hurt. And I don't mean myself or yourself. Who knows? When you get deeper into it, it's not even worth it. And that's part of your transmission. That's who you are. There's nothing wrong with it. And it oscillates and changes at a second by second basis. But when it shows itself, you be mindful. Whenever I do a psychic reading on someone, it's simplistic, only to create awareness. And so when I say to someone, hey, do you want a reading? I don't know you. How would you have a clue about anything about me? because it's information. I'm not, here's the thing, I'm not, my needle's not moved. I'm not looking for your approval. I couldn't give a shit. So I just read the information. And when the information's there, they freak out. So I always start at the bottom with the root chakra, as you put it, which we call it the second dantian. And then they get a little uppity. And then you go to the sexual energy, and then they want to stop. And they go, shit, this is real. Yes, it's very real, but I'm not invested in whether you tell me I'm the next coming of Jesus. It's information, which is the very issue, because if you look at it from the universe or the moral compass of the universe, which it does not have, you are transmitting this evidence of boundaries, and people keep telling you, hey, let me show you.
Oh, they don't do it anymore. Actually, to be fair, I haven't had that happen to me for a long time.
There you go. You've changed how you perceive reality. But the universe is like a little genie. It's like, oh, so you want to experience what it feels like to feel as if you are a healer. Okay. Or you want to experience what it feels like to have boundaries where people try to invade it. The universe just gives you back what you're looking for. And that's where these sort of fundamental manifestors are so deficient, because they never come up to the level of creating the now moment. It, you know, something like The Secret, if you've ever read it, is nonsensical, because it asks you what your values are. You can't have values at the present moment. There are none. To have dominion over this now moment requires no participation of your own.
Well, I'm not sure I would fully agree with the thing about values. I've not heard that. I know what The Secret is. I've never read it. It wasn't really my thing.
Yeah.
One of the things that values are useful for, I think, is that when you don't know who you are because of trauma, because of emotionally immature parents, just because you haven't had parents or caregivers who teach you how to be regulated, who teach you how to know who you are, who teach you how to be human, right? Many of us don't have that. And for me, it feels like quite a human thing to be able to say, okay, what are my values? How do I react to this? Is courage one of my values? Great. Well, I'm gonna be courageous here. Or, is kindness a value? Great. Well, this doesn't feel kind, so I don't want anything to do with it. It just gives people a compass and an ability to start to live in a way that is aligned with themselves. And I think they can be really, really useful for that. The other thing I was going to say as well, in terms of, like, you were talking about messages and channeling, and I work with seership, and I've got this like free section in my membership, because I do believe in showing up in service as well as paying my bills. So I do both, but I do these like free seership hours where people can just come along, and if they want seership, they leave their camera on, and if they don't and they just want to watch, they turn their camera off, and that's what gives me the permission. And then I can just like choose like somebody, whoever the guides are pointing to. And then how I work, but might be interested to see it, how similar it is to how you work, is that I get visions, right? I get these like flashes of images. And often, one lady in particular that I remember really well was like, oh, you've just described my near-death experience to me that I have never told anybody about before. So that was really cool. And there's all kinds of things that happens. I do them like once or twice a month, and it happens all the time. So to me, it's like, it comes in those like visions, and then I have to like interpret the visions for the people who are there, which is really fun, actually. So they'll be like, oh, you know, the vision that you described is this, and then the interpretation of that vision is either spot on or near enough. Like they can understand what I was getting at. Depends how clear and in flow I am that day, because sometimes, you know, your human bits get in the way a little bit. So yeah, it's really fun to do, and it really helps people's faith. They're like, oh, I can't believe you did that. And I'm like, yeah, great, isn't it great? You can do it too. Here's how you would start to like get yourself in a position where you can connect with the divine and connect with guides in a meaningful, helpful, useful way for your human life and your human experience.
You know, I love the reason I mentioned values is not to decimate values. It's just within the secret methodology, They ask the requirement for the manifester is their values, which in essence separates them from this present moment, which is why it doesn't work, because they're stuck in their values as opposed to being now.
Yeah.
And you will acquire whatever it is at this present moment, but that is the super glue. You have to be the resonance and the cultivation of alchemy is the purpose of being able to experience what we call the fajin, the substance. It's plasma. It's like when I put my hand out and I move it around, you feel the vibratory effects of that. It is what we call psychokinesis, and that is a substance. And whenever I imbue or imprint things, it creates a vortices that with your eyes open or closed, whether you're calling your angels in or you're just John Smith having a coffee first thing in the morning on Saturday, you're going to go, what the fuck is this? This is energy going on here. And that's, that's part of this currency. And so, people get caught up in the semantics. The method is always finding yourself, returning to whole. You returning to whole, which then is the facet of what we call the dialogue. I have a dialogue with my teachers, my you call them spirit guides. They're just my teachers. Lao Tzu, have 171 teachers I channel at will. They're a dialogue to the monologue, which is the primordial mother. And the evidence is in this material state through information, through physical healing, manifestation, magic, or it just stays trapped as a transitory delusion in your mind. You have to have evidence for your as you put it, your sovereigns to become whole, to know that this is actually, I'm not repeating insanity by doing the same thing over and over again and getting the outcome, which is nothing, which so many people get into. They get a bite of the spiritual dragon, they see grandma, they have a vivid dream, they witness a physical healing, some miracle, and then they're stuck with that because they have an excess of deficiency. They're not regulating a system that can be repeatable so that you can share with others and give them. And that's what the Taoist alchemy is, a template to enhance your own experience. And, I have people that are on a Jewish path, a Hindu path, a Catholic path. It doesn't really matter. Alchemy is alchemy. Alchemy, in definition, means your relationship, in my situation, with God or Tao, and the dark arts. And that's where people go, whoa, 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 the dark arts. Well, we don't measure things as evil or good. That's a byproduct of some sort of translation. You want a translation to the human condition. You start giving these things identities, and that's okay. But there's substance behind it. The fajin behind it is the substance, the unification, which you can experience at will. That is when you're in the super glue, and now you just move around as you please, which then alters and creates perfection. So when you're casting magic for a Taoist, it's to return things to perfection. The byproduct is, if you are in that line of recreating that resonance, if you are deficient or excess within a karmic model, that's going to show itself. For me, when I cast magic, I don't call it protection. It's just a framework of my reality. It just so happens when someone projects towards me with ill intent, the counter effect of that, it comes back to them 9 times. So I don't sit here going, I want to protect myself. No, I have a construct. It's all there. It's just like when you throw something at me, it just comes back to you. I don't have to worry about the semantics of what your ill intent or your purpose of or how driven you are by your desires to want to do something that is detrimental to my well-being. It just happens that way. I'm not sitting here going, I need to wrap myself in protection. You are me, I am you. So if you resonate with that unification, you are going to experience an expansive experience. If you are in a subsection of, I have my own little version of what this is, and I'm protecting myself with these elements, and I have this particular method, and everything else cannot enter this space, that to me is a delusion, because you are me, I am you. You want witness healing, if you separate yourself. Like people that want to treat people with cancer and other sicknesses, which I've done thousands of through my lifetime, I don't walk into it going, ooh, hang on, I need to wrap myself. You've got that good juju. I don't want it to create my physical body. And this is where people end up sick and dead. I think we should talk briefly before you leave, because I know you're going to give me the drum roll. This whole thing, anyone that ends up on my doorstep is deficient. And I'm like, okay, you're a guru. You're some person who's been making millions of dollars selling spiritual awakening and healing for decades. They end up on my doorstep. I ask them one question. I ask everyone the same question. How do you feel at the end of your day? I'm exhausted, because you fundamentally don't understand that this physical flesh is a byproduct of what we call Jing within Taoism. This is your constitution. You are born into this state with, you want to talk hereditary disposition, gene expression, your DNA. This is just a starting point. It is a seed. And within Taoist alchemy, I refer to it as a battery pack. You come into this life with your constitution. No one has ever hit 100% that I've seen. They're normally about 80. And what happens with cultivational practices of alchemy, we take you up to 100. We go from 100 to 1,000, from 1,000 to 9,000. And yeah, we get started. Yeah, baby. Because that energy is now the ability to now discern and affirm, this is what charges this physical flesh. What you give to others when you are in a position of healing or casting magic or everything else is the primordial mother. It does not come from your participation. So most people, like light workers, besides therapists, qigong masters, reiki masters, shamans, all that kind of stuff, they take from their own essence. And so a part of them is handed out. You can see these, and this is where you get, oh, well, I went to a shaman, it didn't work. I went to an acupuncture, it didn't work. I went to a Chinese, but because that practitioner is deficient in their own ability to capture that state and master that state, because it's a mastery. I don't care who you are. You're on that path. This is how I identify I'm mastering that. And you cannot hand off the deficiency. It's kind of like most psychologists have got more problems than the people that they treat.
Yeah, and it's the same thing, right? It's pulling from your own energy. So that's exactly the same. You're describing really beautifully, if in more words than I would use, the path of the cauldrons way. Essentially, it's to learn how to connect with Imbas Farosne, or the divine knowledge of the gods, or the universe, or the divine, or whatever you want to call it. The whole point is to get to the stage where, when you need, if you are a healer, or you hold, I call it hold space for others, and I really like that term. It's like you draw down from the universe. You're not using your own life force, your own energy. I teach people how to do really simple things intentionally for their kind of spiritual health when they see people. Like, so even psychologists, I have a psychologist friend who now opens and closes space gently between each client. Like, she's like, I hold space, I'm open for this person now, and when they leave, she's like, I'm closed now, that I'm no longer connected to this person. And then we do something called the guardian guide, which is basically like a gentle, just a gentle bubble that means that your human self, your human bit, doesn't pick up anything from the field, but your healer, or the psychologist part, is like absolutely available in there and is drawing down that energy from the divine. And that's made a huge difference to many people that fall over my path. So it sounds like we do very similar things, but you use a lot more words than I do, which I think is really good, because people, lyrical bardic poets like you, really appeal to a lot of people. But for me, I find it really hard to follow that thread if I'm reading something and it's really like kind of philosophical and bardic. Like, that's more of a challenge for my neurodivergent brain. So I like to keep my the way that I teach really simple, like really simple. And understandable in a way that's like on a kind of very mundane human level. And I think that having teachers who teach and create and provide for all walks of life, and for everybody who wants to connect with spirit in a way that works for them is just magic. So it's been like really lovely to dance with the difference and the similarities, and sometimes just exactly the same stuff, listening to the way that we like do things. I don't know much about Taoism, but now I know a hell of a lot more than I did, and I'm very grateful for you sharing all of that information in a way that it's really interesting.
Yeah. I would say in closing, the biggest misconception that people make that get all fired up. I wake up one day, I'm channeling Palladians, open up a YouTube channel, get 100,000 followers. This seems to be quite common these days. 30 years ago, I would have someone, potentially diagnosed with a psychotic episode. I would exercise that energy and return them to whole through ritual as part of training as a Taoist priest. One of them is exorcisms, whether you have to believe in it for it to materialize. So
yes,
I get a fire sale on that stuff, and I haven't seen one in 12 years, and then all of a sudden I just got 24. And so this is what happens when people are embodying their belief system and they still don't have a knowing. So the energetic charge is potential danger zone for someone that is not completely sovereign, as you put it. If you're not whole and you activate your energy body, you can present.
Good luck with that.
And you create a lot of shit. And
you really do.
And that's where I think we both come to that consensus of, people walk the spiritual path, but they're assholes. They're not ascended. They're not enlightened. They're not whole. Listen, I teach people everything from all of the senses of possibility. I teach and have for over 30 years. Now, if I teach someone levitation, which is only 3 people in my lifetime I've ever seen do that. One was one of my students. The other 2 were Indonesian gurus in the jungles of Indonesia. This is a commitment to a processes of awareness. And people go, well, Jifu, why don't you levitate? Because I couldn't give a shit about levitating. I'll give you the formula for it, and I'll teach you how to generate that ascended state. But guess what? Those people are still assholes. They're not whole. They're not ascended. This is a mastery of energy potential. It has nothing to do with you returning as that, what we call the primordial mother. And furthermore, in closing, what happens is, and I've seen this for 36 years, I've been aware of it consciously in this biological body, is, guess what? People who get all gung-ho into this state, and then they burn their jing, and they die. If I had a penny for how many light workers, energy workers, their actual candle burns very quickly. Their mortal state is churned and burned almost instantaneously. Like they do. Most of these people that I've witnessed that have perished due to their commitment to their physical body is just normal. I mean, it happens quite often. You get all gung-ho. I'll find someone, they'll find me in their 20s. They get all supercharged. They take away, 6 months worth of training. They go off to their own thing, and they're dead before they're 40 because they haven't met that resonance. It's a resonance. This is a container, ladies and gentlemen. If you can't hold it, it's always going to show you that deficiency. So in closing, this has been absolutely fascinating. At some point, we'll have to do it again. If you ever get out to Las Vegas, we'll have to make an event out of it. Hopefully, you can bring your husband and your kids. I'm in
Sedona in May, so you never know. It's close enough.
Come down and hang out at the temple. I think it'd be fun. So this is, in closing, I'll ask you one question. What is your definition of spiritual consciousness?
Can you say that again?
What is your definition of spiritual consciousness?
I think for me, my definition of spiritual consciousness is being able to live a full, connected, meaningful human life. And that if I can leave this world better than I found it, then I did a damn good job, and I'm excited to see what comes next.
Oh, man, I want to cry too. I feel it. That's it. that's being present, is feeling that emotion. And you know, I'll hold back the tears, but I can feel you. I see you, my friend, and I love it. I love it. I'm going to put your social sphere and interweb under this podcast, where people can find you. You do one-on-ones, you do group training, you have wisdom teaching. I want my students, disciples, 126s, and subscribers. And the 126, you understand that. People go, what is this? Am I part of a cult? No, the 126s are the subscribers to the app that, hey, I'm just Joe Blow that wants a handle on my emotional state. I'm sick and tired of the rat in the wheel, freaking anxiety and stress over freaking nothing. All I do is clean toilets, yet I feel like I have the weight of the world on my shoulders. You muster it, you master yourself, you get on with your life, you take that innate, ingrained, imbued state within your physical body that you can access at will, and that's the 126. So it's not what is this, some indoctrinated cult? No, it is not. This is just an energy potential that you reveal. You just don't have to be a shaman or a Taoist priest or someone that is awakened to spiritual states. You just want to handle your shit, what happens on a daily basis. So would you like to close with sharing with the audience what you offer or where they can find you?
You'll find me on social media. I'm at Centre for Shamanism, and it's the British spelling of centre. You'll find, if you Google my name, you'll find most things actually. And I also have the Cauldrons Way course and community, and we have a free section of that you can try. My website is centreforshamanism.com. Again, the British spelling, and you can find everything I do there. I also have a book called The Cauldron and the Drum, which is a teaching on the 3 cauldrons as well.
Hallelujah, my dear friend, and amen. And the ammunition over. Yeah, there you go. Look at that. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom teaching. It's mind-blowing and never gets old for me. I wake up every morning and I'm reminded through incredible beings like yourself that this transmission is universal and it comes in all forms, and it doesn't matter who you are, you're going to find it if you allow yourself to
Amen to that.
Yeah. Thank you. I want to thank the universe for bringing you into my life. I want to thank the audience for sharing their time with us today. I am your humble servant and seafood Taoist Master San Qing, and I'll see you in the next one, guys.